Hey there, guys. This is Caitlin, and I want to talk about how not everyone is brilliant at making their own backstory. For some, writing a 15-page backstory is as easy as playing the game itself. For others, they get a few sentences in and run short. One thing that most people don't immediately consider is that for your backstory, well, it's a living, breathing thing. It doesn't have to be a list of deeds or a distant place that you came from. Those characters you mentioned, or the mother that you left behind at your hometown when you went to go adventuring, they still exist. Creating them with enough vague detail for a dungeon master to use them can be some of the best world building that you can actually add to the game yourself. After all, D&D is a collaboration storytelling project between you and the dungeon master. Some of the longest and most emotional moments in my D&D games have been where the party explored backstory NPCs that they had created. Either moments where they expected a character to be dead, but they were not, or introducing a hidden element to the story that relates to characters that already exist. I'm going to use an old example of knowing details about NPCs in your player's starting backstory that can be extremely useful. So, some years ago, I had a player who was a tiefling rogue. They were always trying to obscure their horns and were quite timid and shy. After chatting about this, they told me that the reason was that their mother had been forced out of their family long ago, leaving them with their grandparents, who were particularly harsh on them. I said, well, excellent, this is already quite a lot to work with. They gave me names and motivations of how these characters worked. It turned out the grandparents hated her tiefling heritage. They were human, and so was her mother, but her mother had a tryst, and well, out came a tiefling. However, this didn't explain how this timid, shut-in character became a rogue, so we workshopped it. I worked with a new character, Sorrow, a tiefling enforcer that worked for the local gang. It turned out that their grandparents were in debt, and she was going to be the collateral for a later stage. Sorrow would become the babysitter for this small tiefling girl, though admittedly a harsh one, who was more focused on attempting to toughen her up, cutting out any joy in her life, and even, to be honest, ruining a few of the relationships with boys that she had. All in all, quite a horrible character on the surface. Now, we have plenty of potential characters, but I haven't really even gone into that much detail on everything this girl actually did. But as a DM, I know that there are two grandparents living, a missing father, a mother who was forced to leave, or is at least missing, and the character Sorrow, who has relation to this gang. This is already quite a lot to bounce off of for future roleplay, but I'm going to continue my example to explain why an NPC alone is sometimes better than a full-on detailed backstory. Sorrow would continue to be a part of this character's life until the party ran in with this gang, and Sorrow's usefulness would unfortunately start to run out. Sometime into the exploration of the city, they decided to head to the girl's manor house. She had grown strong enough to feel that she could go back and wanted to get her things and leave properly, to give that final goodbye to her grandparents and then be done with the past she had left behind. On returning, she discovered blood in her room and a soaked note that was from Sorrow. Sorrow revealed her real name, Lasky, apologised for her mistreatment of the kid that had now turned adult, and talked about her mother. She told her that being a tiefling was something to be proud of, and that whilst they were not blood related, Lasky had tried her best to toughen her up, even if it was harsh, knowing that the road ahead in this wild land of Corsica, well, it was never going to be any better for her than it had been for Sorrow herself, and being this timid, quiet girl, she would be eaten alive. With this newfound information, the players reacted quite strongly to Lasky, and so they were given an option. Go and save Sorrow, or let her die. Now you're probably thinking, okay Kate, this is a nice enough story, but it doesn't explain why you think creating NPCs are a more important part of the backstory than a full-on detailed backstory. Well, here's the reason. Most of what I just said, the players didn't know. They'd written the initial opening, they knew of Sorrow, their parents, their grandparents, their harsh upbringing, that they belonged to this somewhat rich family that had their troubles, they knew of the land of Corsica and the city of Thorns that they were from. They knew the rough gist of everything. But they didn't know that Sorrow cared for them. They had no idea that she knew of their mother. And because, rather than simply writing out an incredibly detailed backstory that had given all of these points efficiently, we just wrote out some NPCs with enough to catalogue who this character was, I could use the NPCs that they'd already built and help further the bond with them to deliver these emotional story beats in a fashion that left the players shocked and surprised. Something I think most players and DMs underestimate is a somewhat unreliable backstory. Now, it is incredibly hard to do in a justified fashion, and I would not recommend doing this always. It's something that you pull out now and then. If you do it too much, it ruins your player's creativity. No player wants to eternally make some detailed part of their backstory, then have you flip the table and say, well actually, this is what happened, and that is not what I'm advocating for. Making backstory NPCs allows for your DM to wow you with moments of collaboration. If a dungeon master is truly listening to your character and your story, then they should be able to weave it in a way that fits this current narrative. Having these NPCs with a deep backstory connection allows you to bring forward the past to be thrown into the future in a far better way than simply saying, oh, I was a mage from the academy and these are all the amazing things that we did back in the witch school. If you were instead to tell me that you graduated from this academy and you had your long-time rival that you had a goal to outdo them, or you were always wondering about this one teacher that constantly oversaw you and wondered how you were doing, then that is something I can work off of to give you an emotional tether. I'm not saying don't make a detailed backstory, but you need to put in something called daggers. A dagger is something for a DM to draw upon and use to, well, later on, emotionally stab you with. You want to draw these NPCs that are living or dead characters which can come forward later in the story. There is emotion in going back to your home or your previous life, especially after slaying a dragon or becoming the town hero. But meeting a character from your past who may have grown or changed in their own way, that is an expressive and adaptive form of storytelling that shouldn't be underestimated. So, to move on simply, you should make backstory NPCs. They're incredibly useful for your immersion and your DM with world building. Now, before you start saying, but Kate, I don't know how to design these NPCs, I'm going to go through a few brief questions to help jog your mind towards that. First off, when the NPC was in your life, were they a childhood friend? Were they an adolescent rival or your first fling? Perhaps they knew you or your parents or your teacher. Did you know them when you both started adventuring? Did they even start adventuring? Are they alive? Were they living an ordinary life when you last saw them? What did they do as a job? Were they rich or poor? A man, a woman, non-binary? How are they treated by the community? How are they treated by you? When did you see them last? Did they have any friends? Were they part of a group? How are the two of you involved? These are a few vague questions which hopefully gives you a few threads to start with, ideas that you can pluck upon and consider. I hope that helps, and I hope that you found the point of this video useful at least, and I strongly believe that there is a huge power in backstory NPCs as opposed to a simple wall of text that describes the deeds of your past character. Well, thank you for watching, and if you enjoy my content, then please check out my Twitter down below, as well as my Patreon and Coffee links. It all goes back into everything that I do, and if you're not aware, I create all sorts of homebrew shenanigans that you should take a look at. You can see them on my Twitter, or usually posted for free on my Patreon. Thank you for watching this video. Please, if you enjoyed it, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.